Okay, listen, I'm sure there'll be some more people coming on, but I think we should get started because I don't want to run over and have a lot of questions to ask. And so I'm going to introduce myself. I'm the Executive Director of Teen Cancer America, Simon Davies. Many of you know me. If you don't, it's a great pleasure to see you here, and thanks everybody for joining. This is a great session which I'm really looking forward to, and it is my absolute pleasure to be introducing Joy Clausen Soto. I see you get yourself down as Joy Soto. Actually, let me just rename myself so people know who I am. And Joy is something of a celebrity in my book, because I can tell you that she is a filmmaker. She has made her own film, a film that hit film festivals about her and experience. She's an author. There's a great book. Now this is on the, it was on the advertising, but this is the book. Why is it not focusing? How's that? No, there you go. There you go. So Joy's got the book. So the book is great, you know, and actually I hope afterwards everybody who's kind of emailed in their registration, we can send you all these links. There's a great TED talk that she's done, and there's also a TV interview that was done about her, and so, you know, it was really good to have her join us. And she was introduced to us by her good friend Ryan, who's here today with us. Give us a wave, Ryan, who is a fantastic support to her, I know, during her treatment and since then, and you know, we'll talk about that some more. And this is a great opportunity really just to explore, you know, how this has all worked out for you, Joy. You know, it's and what we can learn, you know, from your experiences as well. Laura's made me the host, so I'm actually admitting people at the same time. So just forgive me if I falter once or twice. But you know, let's get started. You're down in San Diego at the moment, are you?
Yes, I am.
Yep, down in San Diego. Well, that's good to see that you're local and we're on the same time zone, or at least those of us in California are. You know, I want to talk about, if we can go back, everybody knows that, you know, you're a dolphin trainer, and that's something that we'll talk about. And I suppose I want to go back to sort of the pre-diagnosis time. I'm not going to go all the way back for you, but I want to go back to the pre-diagnosis time and just talk about that. And let's get this one out of the way, because everybody wants to know how cool really are dolphins, because you know, they look just the most amazing animals, and you know, you must have built some extraordinary relationships with them. What's all that like, you know? And you have to do that amazing swim test just to get past the qualification to be.
Yeah, it's a pretty big swim test, so I'm happy I passed it. To work with the dolphins was truly one of the best times in my entire life, because we got to build relationships with these animals, and every dolphin was different, just like people. We all have different personalities, and the dolphins all had different personalities. So I had my favorites. We all had our favorites. And there was one dolphin named Gracie who I just loved, and she was this big Pacific bottlenose dolphin, and she loved ice cubes. So if I wanted to, you know, have the best reinforcement ever for her, I would get a big bucket of ice cubes, and I would just dump it into the water, and then she'd come back and just start munching on it. And I could hear her vocalizing the whole time, and she'd be closing her eyes. It was just wonderful. But we train all the dolphins there to do the healthcare behaviors or husbandry behaviors, and blood samples is one of them, or just chuffing, you know, blowing into a petri dish. But the relationships there are just incredible. And that's why I really wanted to introduce my roommate initially to the dolphins. And then I started a program at SeaWorld for kids with cancer, because I wanted to share this incredible world that I had experience with.
Okay, so I mean, that's great. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. But you then made the switch to
Well, since I was little, I always had a love for filmmaking and just the movies. I found myself working at SeaWorld at my dream job, and all I could think about was what to edit and how to edit when I got home, because I would be working on an iMac, this little iMac at home, and making these movies, for work or for my friends. And so that started to take over, and I had a real passion for it. And so it got to a point where it was recommended that I go to film school, and then I started looking into that. And before I knew it, I was admitted to a film school up in Santa Barbara, and
Hello.
I left my dream job to go do that.
So yeah, it wasn't long into your filmmaking at Santa Barbara that you actually got your diagnosis, and I really want to talk about that because there's some interesting factors there. Because I know that when you were first diagnosed, you were diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, which is, I hate this term, but a better cancer to get, apparently, because there's a better chance of survival. But yeah, that wasn't how it turned out. I mean, tell us just a bit about that period and how things changed for you there.
Yeah, I was initially diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was going through my treatment, and I remember after my second treatment, I got a phone call from the doctor, and I'd missed it. And when I heard that it was from the doctor, I was really concerned because, in my experience, when you get a phone call from the actual doctor, that's cause for concern. And so it took me a day to get a hold of her. So the next day I got a hold of her, and I found out that it was actually non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that they need to change my treatment and be more aggressive with it. And that's when we asked for a second opinion with Dr. Siegel, who my aunt happened to know, who was a pediatric oncologist at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And he recommended a really intense chemotherapy regimen. And he could still use the first two chemotherapies I'd done. I didn't have to start all over again. So I was relieved to hear that, because it was similar enough. And I was kind of in this weird gap, because the protocol that he recommended, the adult oncologists or the hospitals, apparently where I lived, they didn't feel comfortable doing it because they didn't have experience with that kind of protocol for an adult. So I was in this limbo area where I wasn't a child, so it was kind of strange to be treated at a children's hospital. But the protocol that was best for me, the adult hospitals didn't know how to treat that properly. So luckily, they actually had treated me over at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and I'm here today. And I just remember Dr. Siegel talking about wanting to go for a cure with me, and I just felt so good to hear him say that.
Well, I'm going to stop and just ask Stu to comment on this thing, because this is like a really important thing for us as a charity. This is you were having a pediatric opportunity for a pediatric protocol. You were 25 at the time when you got cancer. For us, there's a big issue about young people getting not getting treated in the right place. And Stu, I know this is a really important point to you, and I'd just love you to just crystallize that for us. What went on there, and what could have gone wrong in that scenario? Stu needs to be unmuted.
There we are. Actually, it's kind of a classic example of what goes on with young adults, because as Joyce said, you're sort of in between. You're in between kids and adults. And actually, as you know, we all know, the adolescent young adult age group is now being recognized as a very specific group with very specific characteristics as far as cancer goes, and includes diagnoses that maybe pediatric oncologists would be more familiar with, and others that adult oncologists are familiar with. So the actual important thing is that when you have a young adult with cancer, they really need to be treated at a place where they have both pediatric and adult oncologists working together, so that wherever their cancer happens to fit, you have someone who's experienced in dealing with that particular kind of cancer and knows the treatment protocols. And so, Joy's situation was a classic example of that, where what she ended up having, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, required a much more intensive treatment program than what would be for Hodgkin's disease. And that is more familiar to pediatric oncologists. So having a pediatric oncologist involved allows you to do that. And a lot of AYA centers, as you know, Simon, a lot of AYA centers now are really developing to have both pediatric and adult oncologists working together, exactly for that reason. Exactly for that reason.
And that's really the raison d'etre of Teen Cancer America, because we're trying to bring those two silos together. You know, you will get early onset adult cancers appearing in the pediatric world and late onset pediatric cancers appearing in the adult world. And those young people need to be treated by the best people with the best experience. And in your case, Joy, and we'll talk a bit about that experience, what that meant was that you got treated at a children's hospital at the age of 25, which I know there were many good and positive things about that for you, but also, I mean, how many people did you meet during your treatment journey who are being treated at the same age as you?
No one. I was older than some of the nurses there. So
So,
that was strange.
so I'm just trying to sort of explain to people how important it is that obviously the best treatment is really important, but also the environment. You know, you'll hear soon how Joy made the most of being amongst little children, but she didn't have the opportunity for the camaraderie that being treated with other people her own age might have brought. And I know how you got through that, Joy. You imported all your friends onto the ward, I noticed when I read the book. You had some really good support mechanisms, which we'll talk about again. But, you know, I mean, you must have seen that, you know, there you were in amongst the Disney wallpaper and the, you know, the little kids, average age 6 or whatever it is in a children's hospital, and you at 25, a little bit different, to say that.
It was different. It would have been nice to be around other people that were my age, but at the same time, I mean, I think it was okay for me because I was able to see these kids and get inspired by them, because they, you know, when it hits kids, it doesn't hit them the same way. Somehow they are so brave and get through it so much better than adults do. But no, I didn't have a cohort. I didn't have anyone that was my age going through the same thing with me. It was just me.
And of course, the reverse can be true as well, that we see young people being treated on adult wards where, you know, the average age is 60 and they may be a, you know, a 19-year-old, and that's, you know, far from motivating. So that's, you know, that's nowhere near as helpful. So anyway, so so let's just talk about, you know, what all this meant to you, because it's clearly, you know, from everything that I know about young people with cancer, but clearly from what you went through, I mean, this was an emotional roller coaster for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was definitely an emotional roller coaster, and I always try to be strong for my friends who were there with me. But during that time, I was actually making a documentary on myself, which was helpful because when I was feeling overwhelmed and scared, I would just tell that to the camera, and I wouldn't have to confide in my friends about how I felt. But yeah, it was definitely a lot to go through emotionally.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I think at a young age, I think that's challenging as well. You know, you're at a time of life where you've just had your film school disrupted. You know, you weren't able to. In fact, I seem to remember that you managed to stay on your course for a longer time because you were actually you used your film about yourself with your coursework, didn't you?
Oh, no, 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 I wasn't able to go to film school anymore. They
That
said
was really
no.
it. They just said you
They said
couldn't
no,
go.
thank you. I wanted to keep going to school when I was sick, but they said no because I couldn't do all of the work. I would be too weak from the chemotherapy. I
Yeah,
wanted to still sit in class, but they said that that wasn't allowed. So I had
yeah,
to stop. But the way I was able to maintain some control, which was really important to me, was to find some way to have control over my life still, because
yeah.
it felt very out of control. And so by making that documentary on myself, I felt like, okay, well, I'm still learning about film, even though you know, basically that's been taken away. I'm still finding a way to do this. And I wanted to show a story on survival, which was really important to me because, you know, I love film. And the first thing I did was I turned to film to look at these movies about people going through cancer. And I see all these people who pass away, but I knew that there were millions of survivors out there, and that was the story that I wanted to show. So it was really nice to be able to focus on the documentary and filming myself. And then I did actually end up going to the American Film Institute the following year for producing. So I did do that. I don't mention that very often, but I did go there for producing.
And I would say, you know, looking at your film and reading your book as well, that camera itself was to some extent some kind of therapy to you, or a confessional. I mean, it was an opportunity sometimes for you to say things out loud that it sounded like you weren't getting the opportunity to, or you didn't feel comfortable saying to other people, or burdening other people with, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because for me, I wanted to be strong for everyone who was around me so that they could be strong for me. Because if I broke down, then they'd break down. If they broke down, then I broke down. It was just a mess. And so I would put on this strong front when other people were around, but to have that outlet, to be able to talk to the camera about my emotions was very good. And then when I was done with, when you're done with treatment, then you're told to go back to normal life. But I was bald, and my muscles had atrophied, and I didn't realize it, but I had PTSD. And every night I would dream about being sick. It wasn't bad. It was just, I was sick again. I was in the hospital again every single night. It never let up. And so finally, after a year, I got help, and I started talking about what I'd gone through with someone, and I was able to get out all of this stuff that I hadn't been able to tell anyone before. So that was really cathartic for me, to be able to talk to someone.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think that's a very common experience, and it's really difficult to think of young people particularly going through that, because the sort of teenagers and young adults are at an age where they know what's going on, and they also know the impact of their illness on the other people around them, and they're the people that you love, and they're the people that give you your support. And as you say, that's something that then so then where you to go, they want you to kind of share with them, but at the same time, you're feeling responsible for the impact on what your illness is having on them, and how distressing that is. So it's really important that people get the right sort of support when they're going through treatment. But I want to talk a little bit about hair loss, because it's something that you talk a lot about. I mean, it appears more than once in your storyline. And I feel that for you, that was symbolism which was very challenging to deal with. And I know everybody, knows that cancer patients lose their hair, and they're used to the images of bald people, but that's still a really personal thing about your own identity. And I'd just like to sort of share what that meant to you. Because there were some very emotional moments when you're watching that film, when I can,
Yeah.
you can, every movement of the razor is another cut to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of girls associate themselves with their hair, and for me, it felt like my identity. So, and honestly, I just knew about people who had cancer from afar, and so I knew what cancer patients looked like, that they didn't have any hair. And even though I had cancer, I didn't feel like a cancer patient yet. Now, when my head was shaved, that was the first time, and I had my brother shave my head for me, because all my hair was falling out anyway. But when he shaved my head, that's the first time I looked in the mirror and I saw a cancer patient. So there was a big, it was pretty emotional for me, because there's a big change. It's like, okay, I really am sick. It's not just, this thing that will be taken care of quickly. I mean, this is a full body change I'm going through, and I am now one of those cancer patients that I've seen on TV. Now I'm one of those people that's fighting for my life. So it was definitely very heavy for me. And then I don't know, I would always wear a hat. Actually, Ryan gave me the hat that I love the most. It was like this little blue hat. I still have it. I have access to it right now if I had to go get it. But this really warm blue hat that I'd always wear. But I also wore it because I felt like I didn't want to show, I had like a lot of guy friends around, and I didn't want to show them my bald head. I don't know why. I just felt like it would be hard for them. So I always try to wear something.
Yeah. Well, I think it just shows that, the cancer journey isn't just a physical journey, about getting through the cancer itself. It's also about the impact that it has on your identity, on your and your emotions and your psychology, all wrapped up in that. And Ryan, if you want to give us a quick wave, was a big support. Come on, Ryan, there he is. He was a big support, I know, going through, as were many of your friends, and you list them in your book. You obviously got some great people and great family members, which must have meant a big support to you. And I noticed that one of your techniques, and again, I'd like you to share why that was helpful to you. But you get angry with yourself. you get angry with yourself about, trying to convince yourself that, you're lucky. That's what you say a lot of the time. You say, oh, I'm lucky. There are other people that are worse off than me, and I shouldn't be like this. And you actually fight with yourself with what because you're depressed at times and really stressed about it. But you did fight with yourself. I saw that.
Well, because there's the physical aspect, so you're fighting for your life physically, but then mentally, there's also a battle. And for me, it was the battle to remain positive. And so that was what I like to label my lowest point, when I started losing my hair and my stomach was all upset. And I just found out that it was definitely non-Hodgkin's. So it was not the diagnosis I had before. It was a different diagnosis, which wasn't as good. And I just was in this mental battle with myself to be positive. And it's crazy how you can kind of dismantle mentally at times and start giving yourself pep talks. So I was, saying, you're too lucky, you're so lucky. And I was just trying to get myself back up because I felt really bad for myself. And I just knew that I'd done so many great things in my life that I didn't feel like I should be feeling sorry for myself. But yeah, when you see someone going through cancer, it's not just the physical, it's the emotional battle too. And it goes on afterwards. So even after they survive, there's a lot that still needs to be done to heal that person.
Sure.
And they're not done, even though they're done with the treatment physically, there's a lot of mental aspects that need to be worked on for them to become whole again.
That's right. I'm going to talk to you about that in a bit. And I know that another thing that was important to you, I know this isn't everybody's cup of tea, but for you, I feel that your spirituality was important to you as well. You did an awful lot of thanking God for all those little moments when something happened to you, that actually you were, that was something that was personal to you and important, and you could tell that comes through, and we quite often miss that in treatment when we're thinking about what's important to people, and I think spirituality can be tremendously important, whether it's in a God or whether it's in a personal type of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I definitely thank God a lot. I mean, it's just a matter of being grateful, because I got to a point right in the very beginning, a week after I was diagnosed, where I got really angry. I got really angry because I was dating someone and he left me when he found out that I was sick. So he literally stopped talking to me. I left a message saying that I had cancer. He never called me back. And then I got a hold of him through my aunt's phone because he didn't recognize it. And then he hung up on me the minute he heard my voice. And so that is why I was so mad. And I was so mad that I actually, for the first time, felt pain. And that I had that big lump right here. That was a lymphoma. It was one of the places where the lymphoma was. And I hadn't felt pain there before. In fact, that was one of the signs that it was bad, because when the doctor was pushing on it, I said it didn't hurt. And he said, it's not always good when it doesn't hurt. And so a week later, I'm upset because of this stupid boyfriend who won't talk to me anymore because he found out I had cancer, and I started to feel pain there. And so I realized in that moment that I need to change the way I was thinking. And that's when I remembered, actually, Zig Ziglar. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of him, but he's a motivational speaker. He was incredible. And he would always talk about gratitude and respond versus react. To respond is positive, to react is negative. And so I decided to start responding to what I was going through instead of reacting. And I started to go through all the things I was grateful for. Like, I was grateful that I found a great doctor. I was grateful that they found it at stage 2. I was grateful for all of my friends and family and all of the love that I felt. So I was thankful to God, and I was just thankful to for everything in my life that I did have. Because if you just focus on the negative, that will weigh you down really fast. But for me, I just try to focus on the positive, and that helped me get through it.
I like the story as well. If there is a good, I thought a God, there was a neat trick he played with your grandpa Len, wasn't it?
What was that? I don't.
Well, you said it. Well, there was a bit where your grandpa had been he'd been read the last rites, and I think it was your aunt or somebody went to see him and said, he's got to look after you, because they're very worried about you not surviving, and he bounced back. And he bounced back, and he stayed good until just about the day that you got you
The
know.
day of. So my grandpa Len had been a priest in the Catholic Church, and he left to marry my grandmother. And he was just like this wonderful, beloved guy. He would play golf in Palm Springs. There was a golf tournament named after him. He just was this incredible person, and he was in his 90s. And my aunt went there to the home, and I had visited him before I found out I was sick, just to say hi and to wish him happy Thanksgiving. And then shortly after, they were reading him his last rites, and he was about to pass. And my aunt went there and said, he said, Len, I know that you prayed for me a lot through the years. When you get to heaven, I need you to pray for Joy. And so she told me that when she got home. And then the next day, we got a phone call from the home saying that we don't know what happened. We've never seen this happen before. He's bounced back. He's making jokes with all the nurses. It's like nothing ever happened. And that was in December. And I found out on Valentine's Day that I was cancer free. I remember I had my scan around 10 o'clock in the morning, and he passed away around 11 o'clock or so. And I remember when I heard that, I said, he knew I was cancer free. So, he really, because my aunt said, I bet you he's sticking around until he knows that you're better.
Yeah.
And he really did.
Yeah, I know. I thought it was a cool little vignette story there. So anyway, well, look, thanks for that. So I want to talk about, obviously it's a wonderful moment when you know that you have that you'll no longer have cancer, and that you're cancer free, even though you have some ongoing treatments. But you really found that period afterwards tough. I know I'm going to just quote you some things that you wrote or you said. I can't remember. You said, one of the hardest things is feeling like I dropped off the planet. You said you felt lost in a thick brush that you had to, like being in a jungle that you had to hack through with a machete. That you felt like you definitely had PTSD, and that you actually isolated during that period afterwards. Instead of going out straight out on the town, you shut yourself in a room for a period of time. Can you talk about that period and what that meant? As you sort of theoretically left or were leaving the cancer world to get back into your old life or your new life.
Well, if you think about it, we're all on a certain trajectory in life. And for me, I was on this trajectory to go into filmmaking. And I just started. I was just 3 months in when this happened. And then all of a sudden, I'm thrown off course. I'd left my other job that I loved. And, I wanted to keep doing this, but I really was thrown off course. So it just kind of, you go through this period where you're trying to find yourself again and build your self-esteem and just become the person you were before. At least I was. I know I wasn't the person I was before. I feel like I was a very strong person before, and I feel like I used up all of my strength to get through cancer. And then afterwards, I wasn't the same person, and I didn't have that same strength anymore. So it was just trying to get back to who I was, which took a long time. And you're right. I just kind of locked myself in a room waiting for my hair to grow back. I'm sure most people don't do that. Clearly I'm a little insane, but I did. I locked myself in the room and just waited for my hair to grow back just enough so I can go out and feel semi-normal with other people without having to wear a wig. And then I started trying to build back my life, but it took years for me to feel like I got back on my feet. And that really didn't come until I went back to SeaWorld finally, because that's where I'd been the happiest. So I decided to finally go back there.
Yeah, that's right. I remember in your book, I think you went and lived in Hawaii for a while, and and that didn't work out either. And so I want to again sort of dwell on that a little bit from Teen Cancer America's perspective, because we work with adolescents and young adults, and we hear a lot about what people talk about, the cliff edge. Cancer becomes your all-consuming world, and then you have to find a way of moving on. And I think, what we recognize and increasingly recognize is how critical it is to support people after that, not just, they obviously need the continuing medical support that people like Stu and others will give, but the personal support to get you back on your feet, because you really have been kind of, as you described, sort of deconstructed. And how do you build back up? And it isn't like going back to how it was before. It's the new life, isn't it?
It's the new life, yeah.
And,
Go on.
well, I was just going to say, and things have changed. Your friends have moved on, or people have, in your world have changed from where you were before cancer, and you have to find your way back into that, don't you?
Yeah, and I had a great support structure. I had tons of friends, Ryan's one of them, who were there for me when I was sick. But then afterwards, I think what happens is, okay, you're cancer free, great. Everyone goes back to their normal lives, including me, but my normal life has changed. And the support that I had, because I really was uplifted by so many people, but the support I had just kind of fell away, which makes sense because I'm cancer free, but I still
You rang the bell.
I didn't ring the bell. I was too scared to, honestly. I didn't want to come back. So I didn't ring the bell. I just slowly left quietly in the night. And I remember actually Ryan was there my last day, and I was, because there's the fear that it's going to come back. That's a big thing that you're left with, is that fear that's going to come back. And I remember Ryan, hugging Ryan and, telling him that I was scared about that.
Let's just hear what Ryan's got to say. Right, Ryan, you kind of went through this journey and you saw Joy coming out the other side. I mean, it's tough to watch, isn't it? Can we get him on speaker?
Yeah, they got me unmuted. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's an emotional journey for those people that are close to, whether they're your friends or your family, and just telling the story about her grandfather got me all choked up. The beautiful thing about Joy is, I mean, she's an amazing person. I mean, for you guys that don't get to know her, I mean, we met in Spanish class in undergrad, and we became really close friends. And she's got a really great, and I think it's, what you put out there is what you attract. And Joy has a really great village. And I think that, when I talk to people and I've sent people her book, it's not only just her personal mindset, which is tough, like we all have weakness, right? Like, and you want to go down the self-pity path, but I think it's the people that can help lift you up, and know that you have people that love you and stuff like that. And you think she got angry when her boyfriend broke up with her? I mean, there were quite a few of us that were less excited about it, to say the least. And so anger was definitely emotion, but we wanted to put all that aside for Joy, and it was the most, I don't even know what to put into words. And I'm somebody, if you guys don't know who I am, I'm not short for words very often, but the experience was something that's nothing that you can ever explain. Just being there by somebody, who's going through these emotional periods. I remember when, all the things that you've talked to her about, turning the camera on herself, and her brother helping her shave her head, and just all these milestones, even just the spinal taps, being there to hold her hand and go through that. And we all took turns. We were all there when she, not one very few people could be there all the time, but we all were kind of on shifts, if you will. But yeah, it's something that you shouldn't be alone with. That's for sure. And it's so common, as we work with these different organizations like Teen Cancer America, which is a great or amazing organization. You go around the room and you say to people that are just getting involved the first time, tell us your story about how your life's impacted, and everybody's life's been impacted, and that's the thing. And so when you see people get involved in just trying to uplift others and be there and be their support, I think that's the thing that is so great. And I held up a bunch of the books, and they're over my shoulder there, and we've offered to Teen Cancer to that I would sponsor some books to some of your survivors, to some of the people that have just been diagnosed. I have a few friends, unfortunately, over the last few months that have been diagnosed that we've been able to send books to, that are going through different types of cancers. And I think it's just what Joy said. And the last thing I'll say is, she really was focused on, and she talks about in her book, the reason why she wrote this book wasn't for some sort of ego or anything. Nothing that she does has anything to do with it. This was, she wanted to tell a positive story about cancer, because everything out there, when I've talked to friends about it, it's like from between the movies and everything else, it's all, the person dies at the end of the movie and everybody's crying, right? There's very few of those that, that Hollywood makes, where the person survives, and then you go on to see chapters later in Joy's life where she met somebody amazing and her husband Alex, and then didn't know if she could have kids, and went on to have two beautiful children in Ryan and Christiana. So you know, it's a pretty special story, and I'm glad she told it. And it started at the very beginning with her turning the camera on herself and being vulnerable. And it was therapeutic, but it was also being vulnerable. You know, I guess the vulnerability isn't in the moment. It's the vulnerability is in editing, having to sit in the editing bay, edit it, right, Joy, and then put it together, and then make it tell a story, and then put that out there into the world and the world to do something better. You know, to help. You know, she was working with doctors at the school. I don't know if you've told the story about how you would speak at the schools and stuff like that, and I don't know the exact tenure of that, but she would go there and speak with, maybe you should tell that story, but anyway, she was always trying to get out there it wasn't just about the patients, it was about the people that interact with the patients. My grandmother was a nurse. She worked in the ICU of the old Cedars of Lebanon on Sunset back in the day. She raised me, and there's this thing that sometimes people go through in the medical profession where they're so exposed to so much heartache and loss that they kind of become apathetic, not intentionally. They just don't want to get close to the people, you know, because they know that they might lose, especially in an oncology ward at Children's Hospital with a bunch of little kids, you know, like, you know, and Joy and us became close with some of those people around us, and it was, you know, it's hard. So she's
well, you were clearly a special part in Joy's journey, and still are, and you know, I think you just demonstrated how important the friendships and the people around you are. And in fact, I think one of the things I noted that you said here was the number of people around me that love me make all the difference, Joy. And I think that demonstrates that. I want to talk on now just to sort of talk about the now and where you've got to, and the work that you're doing at SeaWorld. I just clearly, you know, you touched on it, Ryan, but you know, you don't know when you have cancer whether you're going to be able to have children, and fertility is clearly an issue. You found the love of your life, no question about that, in Alex, but of course there's a challenge in there that you might not be able to have children, and you've won through that one, but it's another long-term anxiety that you have, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was first diagnosed, you know, I'm told you need to go through 6 months of chemotherapy. If you don't, because I did ask what would happen if I don't, because I didn't want to, I was told that I'd be dead within the year. And by the way, you should probably freeze your eggs. I mean, that was all in one package. On one day, I was told all of this information by another oncologist. And for me, I just didn't even want to deal with the fertility part. I just wanted to get past this and survive. And like, who cares about the fertility? So I know that you talked about how important it is to really have counseling sessions about that. And I know with the other doctor I'd been with, there was no counseling session. And it's just very overwhelming for the person going through it. So, you know, you might give them the information on that first day, but especially at such a young age with a young adult and the teen area, you really need to counsel them on that, because it has long-term effects for their future.
That's right. And you can imagine, I mean, challenging to have that discussion with you at that age. You know, in some of the facilities that we're talking about, they're having to have that discussion with a 14-year-old and their parents, you know, at the same time. And that's, you know, when they're not even thinking that far ahead in their lives, but it's a really important discussion to have. So thank you for sharing that. So, okay, so you get back to SeaWorld, and you've met Alex, the love of your life, who's clearly been an incredible support to you, and you have these two beautiful children. Is it Christiana and Ryan?
And Ryan,
well?
yeah.
Ryan, there you go.
Because every Ryan I met has always been really nice. So
Good. And I think I do seem to remember that in the book there's a reference to a song by Ryan Adams. So there must be.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Ryan
good
and
singers.
Ryan are big in your life. But yeah, so when you get back, you know, so now you're back at SeaWorld, and obviously that's an entertainment place and all the rest of it, but you decide to do something, you know, that's more meaningful to you, that goes beyond just that entertainment. So tell us about what you've been doing there and how you've been helping other young people and children.
Well, I had a dream of bringing my roommate. I had a 5-year-old roommate that I became very close with, and I had a dream of, when we're out of here, when we're healthy, I wanted to introduce her to a dolphin, and I had this vision of us both having hair and getting in the water. And it took a while for me to get back to SeaWorld, but when I did, the first thing I did on the day that I found out that I had a job was I called her. And I let her know that I'd be working back at SeaWorld, and you can come down and you can meet a dolphin. And so she was really excited. We set up a day, and then it just didn't happen because there was some confusion with everything. So I was going to set something else up, and then it gets to be winter time, and I don't want her to get sick, and and then I got moved to another area. So just things happened, and it was always on my list for her to come back. And then she ended up having a occurrence, and she passed away. And they had lost my phone number, so they couldn't get a hold of me. So that was really devastating. And I just couldn't let go of that dream. I remember my husband asking me what my dream was a couple months later, and I just couldn't let go of this dream I had of bringing my friend, my roommate Bailey, into the water. And so he was the one who came up with the idea. This is why he's so wonderful, because he said, why don't you just make this an annual event, and you can bring other people from Children's Hospital to the park, and they can get in the water. And that's exactly what we did. So I went to SeaWorld and I proposed it, and I came up with all these reasons, for anything they were going to say no to. I had a reason for them to say yes, and I didn't have to do that. They automatically thought it was a wonderful idea. And we started our annual event in 2008. And that's when we started our program for kids from Rady Children's Hospital and Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where they can go down there and just get in the water to meet a dolphin. And what was great about that is it builds their self-esteem. They get to do something different that they didn't, think they would have an opportunity to do. And they get to have fun, it's just a day away from everything. But beyond that, it was really important for me to show them an example of someone who had survived, because when I was sick, that's all I wanted to see. I wanted to see someone who was healthy and back in their normal life, and I wanted to know that they had cancer and that they had survived. So I eventually started telling all of the groups, hey, I know you're being treated at Children's Hospital, and I was treated there too for cancer. I had cancer about 20 years ago, but now I get to work here at my dream job, and I get to share it with you. And that's it. I would just say that. And with that, they knew that if I could do it, they could do it too. And that's what I wanted to put out there. And that's why I've written the book. That's why I've done a TEDx. That's why I've done all of these things, because it's very important to me to share the story of survival and to help other people.
And it's amazing. And I know as well that through that process, you've seen some breakthroughs in communication and how it's helped some of the kids that have come along, haven't they? That they've not been communicating or sharing their story, and the dolphins has been a way for them to express themselves.
Yeah, there's been kids who haven't talked in months. They haven't talked at all, and they get in and they're talking to me and interacting with the dolphin, or they haven't smiled in a long time, or they haven't even gotten off the couch, or just things like that. We're all going through our own battles in life, and to just have something like that where you can have a day away and get away from everything, I can really see that change in them. And not just the kids, but also the parents. I mean, the parents, it was just always really emotional to watch them watch their kids get in the water. So I think it was a really great event and healing for everyone, the children and the parents alike.
Well, we've got 10 minutes left. I want to give the opportunity for anybody to ask you a question, but just what's next for you? Anything you want to tell us about what's coming down the line? Got a feature film in the track or anything?
It's funny you say that. I know I'm a feature film, but I just can't get filmmaking off my mind. So I'm writing some screenplays right now and working on that aspect. I just have to be creative. If I'm not creative, then I'm not happy. So I'm also working on things that make money for me, but then the screenplays. Good.
Well, I think we've got I think on here Hanan Barangan has joined us as well, as somebody who's another filmmaker and a screenwriter, so scriptwriter. So he's I'm sure you two will stay connected on that front. But anyway, look, we've got 10 minutes. I want to just see if there's anybody who's got a question for Joy, or a comment on anything they've heard, or a question for me, or anything. So does anybody want to call out or wave, or what's the way we're going to do this? Hold your hand up, chat.
I can't turn on my video for some reason, but this is Gina.
Hi, Gina.
Hi. I work specifically with young adults with cancer, and I do the fertility consult and referrals. And I wanted to first ask a clarification question. Did you go forward with fertility preservation, or did you not?
I did not.
Okay. And do you feel like that would have, okay, so you talked about having having a counseling session or something, like you didn't have that, but what would, in your mind, what would have been helpful for you?
I think probably to separate that, or to just have that booked already for me. Like, okay, you're going to go to a counseling session for fertility. I just because it was kind of combined with everything, with having to go through the chemo. This is what your treatment's going to be, and your diagnosis, and it was just everything plus the fertility thing and freezing my eggs, and it was too much for me all at once. And so I had to cut something out, and that was that. I don't care about that. I just want to save my life. So I think if I had a separate appointment before my chemotherapy started to really talk to someone, even if it was separate from that oncologist, like, okay, now you're going to go into this room and talk to someone, and that's all I talked about was that, I think it would have hit home how important it was, because I didn't get that, and I didn't care when that was thrown in there with everything else.
Got it. Okay, that's good to know.
Okay.
Thanks, Gina. Yeah, thanks for that. Anybody else got a question they want to ask?
I do, and I can't turn my video on either. Joy, it's been a pleasure to listen to your story. You're a great storyteller. You expressed that you felt you needed to be strong so that others around you could be strong, because if you broke down, they couldn't be strong then too. And I just spoke with a young woman yesterday who was diagnosed about a week ago, and she kind of said the same thing. She was very afraid to tell her parents.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is the first time I've heard this, and I'm hearing something, kind of similar about being strong and 2 days in a row. So can you talk to that? What would be your advice?
My advice, I think the more support you can get, the better. And I can relate to that because I told everyone about it, but my mom, I actually kept at a distance because I was worried, because I felt like I'd always taken care of her more, even as a child. And she would say that too. She would, that I was more the mother in the relationship. And so when it came to me being sick, I didn't want to have her around because I didn't want to have to take care of her. I wanted to be taken care of. But I would definitely, tell people so that they know, but then, set boundaries if you need to with people. But I would have a relative come over who I love more than anything, and he would start tearing up and saying, it's the best, you have the best of everyone. And then of course I would tear up, and I just couldn't do it. I needed to have people who could just be strong and kind of act normal around me, be by me. So I would say let people know, but then, choose the people who surround you, the warriors who can be there with you and surround you and keep you strong.
And Betty, I'd like to add to that, because it's a great question, and it's something that we see happens a lot. And you can imagine that even with teenagers, that's even harder for them to have the maturity to kind of deal with that. But one of the things that we witness when we develop specialist programs and facilities for young people where they are together with other young people is that provides an incredible support as well. And so you'll find people who are a bit further on in the journey who almost act as mentors to people that are new to that. And that's something that obviously Joy couldn't get from fellow patients, because you can share things with fellow patients sometimes that you can't share even with your family, or you don't feel strong enough for that. But recognizing that level of pressure, I think, is really important of professional staff and those that support young people, because they need to appreciate that you do need that outlet. I mean, I described that your camera as part of your therapy, and that's the reality, is that you can be very alone with this simply because you care and you love those people. You know, you don't want them to be hurt.
Mhm.
And so you take that responsibility on top of everything you're dealing with. So anyway,
I would love to hear a little bit of, I know this was a surprise for Joe that the amazing, phenomenal, world-renowned Dr. Siegel is on here, but I'd love to kind of.
He's up next for speaking, so leave him some room. Go for it.
No, I just wanted to see them. I just wanted to really kind of hear his his outlook on this and kind of just hear what he has to say, because
he's the man.
Yeah, well, I mean, this brings back a lot. First of all, it brings back a lot of memories, because I remember Joy sitting in her bed, looking in the door of her bed and seeing Ryan and her friends visiting. I mean, there was someone with her almost all the time. It was pretty amazing. I've been through this odyssey she's had with her filming all of her stuff and everything. I think everything that people said was very, very true. I think Joy was so lucky in having such great support around her, because it's a terrible time, and we've all seen, at least I've certainly seen, patients didn't have the kind of support around them like she had. It's really so much more difficult. I actually have a question for Joy that I'm curious about, and that is, and how old are your kids now, Joy? I forget.
7 and 8.
7 and 8. So does your prior illness ever come up in talking with them? I mean, you've been pretty public with what you went through. Has it ever come up with them? And if it has, how have you dealt with that? Because this is sort of a new phenomenon in a sense, as people start doing much better, as you've done, thank God.
They know a little bit about it. They know that I had cancer. And I remember when my daughter was younger, my husband tried showing her the trailer to my documentary. And I was like, no, not that. And she went, Mommy. And so I just don't want to show them that until they're older. But they know that I had cancer. And my daughter says, Mom, I want to be just like you, except the cancer part. So she definitely knows it's not a good thing to have cancer. And they're, I mean, they've seen me do the TED Talk and everything, so they know a lot about it. But I think the questions come a little bit later, and I'll show them the documentary and talk to them more about it. But I think it's a little bit scary for them too, because I think they think, well, what's going to happen to me? And so I kind of want to put that out of their mind and not focus on that at all.
Sure.
I mean, that's a whole other aspect of this environment we're in. I think about this all the time. Here we are taking care of young people with cancer. The impact of what we do carries over many, many years later to the next generations. I mean, it's an incredible, you think about it, it's sort of an incredible sort of environment. The other thing I just want to comment on, Joy, you mentioned about getting kids' self-esteem back. I think I'm sure that's what the dolphin experience does for them. I'm a real big believer in that. I think one of the things that happens to young people with cancer is their self-esteem is just attacked from all sides, both physically and emotionally. And so I think part of the healing process that you go through is to heal that attack on your self-confidence. We do it with the camp program that we have for kids with cancer. You're doing it with the dolphin program. It's the same thing, and it is so important. That loss of self-esteem is a huge thing, particularly someone who physically changes like you do, losing your hair and stuff like that. So I just want to applaud you for understanding that that's a tremendous need that young people have who go through cancer.
Thank you.
Well, and Stu, I want to thank you because, you were a big part in saving Joy's life, that she's here to some extent because of the work that you did. And I also know that because she was 25, you had to go to the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles board and persuade them that it was okay to treat her. So you were fighting from her from day one. So
that was true, actually.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for that because that's so important. And I'm going to give you we've got to wrap up, and I'm going to give you the last word, Joy. But before that, I'm going to give you my last words from you, Joy, because this is what I read in your book. You finish it by saying, and I want to say this to everybody: may your journeys be paved with joy. which I thought was a very cool ending to your book. So that's the last from me. But Joy, come on, you see us out the door, and thank you everybody for taking part. Thank you for staying with us, everybody. Thank you for being with us. We'll have another one of these in a month or two. But Joy, over to you to say goodbye.
Well, I think all of this kind of points to why Teen Cancer America is so important, because it fills that gap. I happen to go to one of the doctors that knew how important it was to treat me at this age the right way and to hit me really hard with chemotherapy, and to give me a pediatric protocol. I mean, I could have easily not gone to a doctor that knew that, but he happened to be on the forefront of that. And so I really believe that I'm here because of that. And that's why your organization is so important, because it is helping to fill that gap and to make it so that more people my age and younger can live full lives, because they get the right treatment at the right time and the right support, just emotionally and medically. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody. And goodbye. Joy, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.